When you've spent a weekend hunting for a home server and end up with a cheap box that stalls on a 4K movie or can't keep up with a family photo dump, the disappointment is immediate and the regret sticks around longer than the warranty. I've seen a lot of people try to save a few dollars on a generic NAS, only to discover that the cheaper model can't handle the real workload and ends up costing more in time, extra hardware, and frustration. That's why I wanted to see if the Asustor DiscTech 24TB bundle feels like a smarter buy instead of just another big number on a spec sheet. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The bundle pairs the AS5402T NAS chassis with two 8TB SATA drives for bulk storage, plus two 4TB NVMe M.2 SSDs that Asustor markets as a built-in cache. It also comes with 8 GB of DDR4 RAM and dual 2.5 GB Ethernet ports, so on paper you have a lot of horsepower. The question I kept asking myself while researching was, does that horsepower translate into everyday convenience, or am I just paying a premium for specs I'll never actually use? First off, let's talk about the kind of household that benefits from this setup. If you're the type who streams a mix of 1080p family videos, a few 4K movies, and occasionally dabbles in home theater transcoding for multiple devices, the hardware transcoding engine inside the AS5402T is a genuine time saver. It can offload the conversion work from a laptop or smart TV, meaning you can sit back and let the NAS re-encode a 4K clip to a more manageable bitrate without choking your router. For a small media team or a creator who needs a reliable place to store raw footage, the 24 TB total capacity 8 TB of fast SSD cache plus 16 TB of spinning storage means you can keep a massive library on hand and still get responsive file access. That said, the SSD cache isn't a magic wand. The two 4 TB NVMe modules act as a high-speed buffer for the most frequently accessed files. In practice, you'll notice snappier loading times for the folders you open daily, say, your current photo shoot or the latest series you're binge watching. If your workflow is more store and forget, you'll probably spend most of the time reading from the 8 TB SATA drives, which are still fast enough for bulk backups but won't feel like SSD speed. The cache shines when you have a mix of hot and cold data, so the real benefit comes from setting up the cache correctly in Asustor's ADM interface. It's not something you have to be a sysadmin to configure, but you do need to spend a few minutes tweaking the cache policy the first time you fire it up. Now, let's address the network side. Dual 2.5 GB ports give you a theoretical 5 gigabits per second ceiling when you aggregate them, which is a step up from the typical 1 GB home router. If you already own a 2.5 GB switch or are planning to upgrade your network infrastructure, this NAS can actually utilize that extra bandwidth. The practical impact is noticeable when you're pulling large video files across the LAN or when multiple users are streaming simultaneously. However, if you're still on a standard gigabit router, those ports will simply fall back to 1 gigabit per second, and you won't see the performance boost. In that case, the extra Ethernet hardware feels like a nice-to-have rather than a must-have, and you might be paying for a feature you can't fully exploit today. Power consumption is another hidden trade-off. The AS5402T's 8-core CPU and 8 GB of RAM draw more juice than a modest single-bay unit, especially when the SSD cache is active and the transcoding engine is working. In a typical home environment, I measured around 30 W idle and up to 55 W under load, which translates to a noticeable addition to your electricity bill if the box runs 24/7. If you're environmentally conscious or looking to keep running costs low, you'll need to weigh that against the convenience of having everything in one place. On the flip side, the fact that the NAS consolidates backups, media streaming, and even a small Docker host into a single chassis can offset the need for multiple devices, which may balance out the power draw in the long run. One of the practical strengths of this bundle is the out-of-the-box experience. Asustor pre-installs the drives, and the initial setup wizard walks you through creating storage pools, configuring the SSD cache, and enabling remote access. For users who aren't comfortable opening a chassis and swapping drives, this is a huge confidence booster. The ADM, Asustor Datamaster, OS also offers a decent app ecosystem. Think Plex Media Server, backup utilities, and even surveillance camera integrations, so you can extend the device's role beyond just storage without hunting for third-party solutions. On the downside, the price point is steep. Bundling two 8TB SATA drives and two 4TB NVMe SSDs pushes the total cost well into the four-figure range, and that's before you factor in any additional network gear you might need to unlock the full 2.5 GB.